Welcome to Htalk. I'm Stephen Sacker. There is a select club of fiction writers whose next book is eagerly anticipated by legions of fans around the world. And my guest today is in that club and has been for more than 2 decades. Patricia Cornwell can lay claim to have invented the whole genre of crime scene forensic detective fiction. Her investigator, Kay Scarpetta, has featured in 24 novels and inspired a host of imitators. The author herself talks of her determination to confront and control her fears. Do her books tell us what she's frightened of? Patricia Cornwell, welcome to
Thank you. I've heard I do the same thing you do.
What's that?
Autopsies.
Well, this isn't going to be an autopsy, but it is going to be a dissection of what you do. And
Okay.
I want to begin by asking you, when did you first realize that you had a gift for telling stories with an edge of darkness to them?
Okay, truth is, I realized it at a young age because I was always making up stories, you know, and the kids loved to hear my stories. But I realized very early on that I could tell stories in a very suspenseful, frightening way. And one day I was holding forth in a vacant lot near my house, and I was probably 9 or 10 years old, in North Carolina, where I grew up. And I scared these little boys so badly they burst into tears and went racing home, and I felt awful. And I went, oh my goodness, I have the ability to make little boys cry. I should have really acted on that and made them cry a whole lot more, but I felt bad about it.
But
so I knew that I could scare people at a really young age.
Very interesting. And you say you felt awful, but I dare say you felt a little empowered too, because it does give you a certain power.
Well, it didn't stop me. In fact, I was writing stories constantly, including, in school, and they would get pinned up on the bulletin board, like when I was in the 4th grade, just a little kid. And, but I will tell you, the most common phrase in any of my stories was all of a sudden. Because everything was spooky and scary, and it's the way someone's walking under a street light in the shadows, and the moon and the clouds going by, and then I had to put a little witch on a broom and draw a picture. So it was all spooky. My favorite holiday was Halloween. I planned for it for months. Loved it.
And you're painting this picture of you at 9 or 10 years old. Now, I know that by 9 or 10 years old, your own life had a lot of fear and sadness and upset in it because your dad left home when you were a very small child. I know your mum had mental issues and had a breakdown when you were still a child. Was there a sense in which you were trying to impose control on your life, or find a way of controlling things by writing stories where, of course, you were the author of everything?
When I was little, I have to say, if I did not have artistic ability and some means to lift myself out of what was all around me, and it's not that it would be necessarily as bad to someone else as it was to me, but I'm very sensitive. I don't know what it was, but I took things really hard, and my father leaving when I was 5, and I adored him. And on Christmas morning of all things, which was, I still remember it as if it was yesterday, really. And then a lot of other things. And my mother, several times when she had a very deep depression, she was hospitalized, and we went into foster care, and that was really, really bad. And I wasn't allowed to leave the house and things like that. So I developed this ability to transport myself. It's no accident that Star Trek was my favorite show on the rare occasion I was allowed to watch it, because I wanted to beam myself somewhere else. And creativity gave me a chance to do that. But I think you're right. I think it's been very tainted by fear and horror and going into those dark places, because I think I felt if I could go into them, maybe I wouldn't be afraid of them anymore.
What's amazing is that you've not only gone into them, but you've stayed in them to a certain extent. I guess without trying to be a sort of pop psychologist, psychiatrist, you've maybe written to a certain extent to control and confront demons. But you've stayed doing it. Some people might have thought, well, you conquered the demons, you had some great success with the books, you could have moved on, but you keep writing them.
Well, it's kind of like when Mary Shelley created Frankenstein, she didn't know that monster was going to live with her for all eternity, right? And so you create something that might actually be a means to you dealing or coping with your own psyche, and it kind of controls your life after that. But in my case, I'm happy that it does. It's a good thing. It's a lot better than what I came out of, which is a life that had no control.
Well, here we are. I mean, this is the latest book, Chaos. I think it's the 24th of your Kay Scarpetta series.
That's right.
Would it be right then to see them, all of them, all 24 of them, as a form of therapy?
You could say that. Hopefully they don't read like therapy and they don't read like some neurotic drivel, which my early ones did, trust me, the ones that didn't get published. But there is, I work through a lot of things in this, and I have Scarpetta do the same. I mean, her biggest underlying motivation is that she became an expert at death at a young age because she watched her father dying. I became an expert at loss, and the loss caused me to fear death, because if you're little and you feel sort of abandoned and alone and you're not sure who's taking care of you, you're worried you won't survive, and I'm lucky I did. Really am. And so I returned to my own crime scene through a very poetic way of dealing with the life of Scarpetta and the cases that she works. And she deals with the loss of her father by always being this expert in death. But no matter how much she picks it apart and puts it back together again, he will never be alive again, and neither will any of her patients. So how do you do that as a human being? And that's part of what's fun about these books and really interesting for me is, how does she go on? And how do any of us? And so it's really not just about a thriller, it's about much bigger subjects than that too.
Well, in a sense, and I said it at the very beginning, you were the inventor of a genre which introduced us to the skills of the forensic investigator, interpreting crime scenes, using science, using research. And it seems to me there's a link there also with your beginnings in your professional life as a journalist, which of course was you going out finding stories and researching them, and also your obsession almost with the fine detail. It seems you really, really
I'm a little bit
dig.
of a weirdo that way, it's true. And as a matter of fact, when I started out at the Charlotte Observer, within no time when they put me into the police beat, it happened within 6 months of my being hired as sort of general assignment, and that was after I did the TV magazine and sent it to hell in a handbasket. I was the worst TV updater they've ever had in the history of the newspaper. But anyway, when I got into the police beat, because I really was a tabula rasa, I used to wear a necklace that had just a little pendant on it with nothing on it, because I felt like when I went off to college and got started in life, I didn't know anything about anything. I'd never written a term paper. Shakespeare meant going to see the movie when I was in high school. I didn't know crap about life. And so when I got into journalism, everything was a brand new experience to me. So I would take a story that had been written 20 times and I'd say, you know what, just look at it as if no one's ever told it before. And next thing you know, you're winning all kinds of awards because you're telling something that is right in front of everyone, but they don't see it when they walk past, and it's a great story. So that's just been my method. It's what I still do.
Millions of people love these books, and there are, I guess, other writers too in the same sort of genre who write great detective fiction which sells by the million. There are other people who frankly aren't interested in crime fiction because of its predictability. I mean, the bottom line is, when you read a crime thriller that there is going to be resolution. I mean, you've written 24 of these, so we kind of suspect that you're not going to kill off Kay Scarpetta. She is going to come out on top.
She may fire me someday, though. I worry about it all the time.
But do you see that point that for anybody who doesn't want to enter a story sort of knowing what the outcome is, there's a problem with a lot of crime fiction?
Well, I think especially if you're talking about the more traditional, where it's very conventional and there are certain tricks to the trade. I remember the first mystery convention, maybe one of the only ones I ever went to in the early days, and they were talking about, red herrings and buried clues, and I went, what? I mean, this is coming out of the context of watching autopsies and being at crime scenes. A red herring is probably some weird food, and I didn't know what on earth they were talking about. And from the beginning, I've always gone away from the conventions of the genre, and you don't know necessarily, like in Chaos, you probably have a pretty good idea who might be behind a lot of this, but you don't really know what's going on because it's more like real life.
Yeah, but have you ever written a story where there is no resolution, where the perpetrator walks away from the scene scot-free?
Yes, but he's gotten caught later.
Ah, well, that's the point.
Oh, yeah, I've had my fourth book, the person didn't get caught. You don't do that. But I went, why not? It happens in real life. I'll get him later. But
it does happen in real life.
Yeah, he didn't get caught for a long time, a really long time. And one person that we thought was caught isn't. So that's the way it works. It's life.
What you mean when you say he got caught eventually in a different book?
In a different book.
In a different book.
Yeah, she finally got, Scarpetta did him in, but it took a while.
The other temptation I think a lot of readers have with you is to try to figure out how much of Kay Scarpetta, who so many people feel they know so well, is actually Patricia Cornwell.
Well, there are many things about us that are similar in terms of our DNA, you might say. I think like she does. I solve cases the way she does. I have the same sensibilities. I'd like to think I'm the same type of humanitarian, have the same values that she does. But beyond that, there are huge differences. I'm not Italian. I'm not a fallen Catholic. I'm more of a fallen everything else. I'm not that smart. I'm not educated the way she was. I couldn't really do an autopsy. I wouldn't even try because it would be wrong. I don't really collect evidence at crime scenes, but I know how to describe it. So there are many, many differences. And the other thing is, she's probably she has a much thicker skin and she's much more disciplined than I would be. I'm volatile. I'm an artist. I get in moods. She can handle it. She's much more disciplined. I would be a terrible Kay Scarpetta. And by the way, she wouldn't make a very good Patricia Cornwell. So there we are. That's the truth.
What Kay Scarpetta has done in her long career in fiction, she's seen a lot of the results of graphic violence, and much of it directed at young women. Not all of it, but much of it. And some of it is fetishized, a lot of it is sexual. How close to the edge of taste, I suppose, but also questions about voyeurism and titillation even. How close to the edge of those issues do you feel you get?
I definitely, it's funny you would say that because I am much more mindful of that edge than a lot of people would know. And you want to get up close to it, but you don't want to cross it. And the problem is knowing what that means. Where is the edge and what does crossing it mean? And for my case, it's where it becomes violent in a way that's no longer safe. In other words, if you're showing what the killer is doing as opposed to showing what Scarpetta imagines and how she cleans up after the fact and solves things, the first part of that is a lot more dangerous than the latter part of that. You're safe when you're with her. So when I went to the third person point of view and started, in some books, getting into the mind of the killer, I did that for a few books, and in my opinion, I started getting over that line, and I didn't like the way it felt, and that's one of the reasons I stopped doing it.
Actually, I thought you stopped doing that, writing in the third person rather than the I form of reading the book as though you were Kay. I thought you stopped doing it because the audience didn't seem to like it.
They didn't like it. They didn't like it at all, but then I didn't like it either. And now I understand why they didn't like it, because I found it very...
But maybe you shouldn't care that they didn't like it. As an artist, you surely have to write from within rather than write simply what you think your audience wants.
I don't write what I think they want, but I do care what they don't want especially. And if something is disturbing and upsetting to my fans, like when I killed off Benton Wesley, it's like the little boys crying in the parking lot. I made the little boys cry in the parking lot again, damn it, And my fans were heartbroken, outraged, upset.
But then when you talk about your fans, I'm just thinking to myself, you sound a bit like...
readers, whatever you want to call them.
Yeah, well, whatever, but you sound a bit like a sort of franchise. And I just think, when we think about the biggest selling thriller writers of all...
I'm turning around, squaring off at you now. You notice my body language has changed anyway.
No, that's good, but think about James Patterson and some of the others. They sell by the gazillion, but it's a bit industrial. They have teams of writers whom Patterson oversees, and he presents them with sort of plot ideas, and then they go and write it in the style of a Patterson, and it all becomes a little industrialized. Are you getting close to that?
Never. Scarpetta's not going to let me share that writing with anybody. I wish I could sometimes, but she only talks to me, and she doesn't always talk to me. I mean, if I thought I could hire a team of people and produce 3 or 4 of these every year that the readers would love, I would do it. I'd make more money, probably, than I do now. But I can't do that. These come from some place inside of me. I give them everything I've got while I'm doing it. I do care what the readers think. They spend their good money on these books. I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for them.
Does it take it out of you? Because,
yes,
we've talked about the dark places, and there's darkness in the books, and you say this is personal, and you're writing from your heart and yourself. And yet, what is miraculous about what you do is that pretty much every year there's a new one. You know, I think you've been writing these books for pretty much 25 years, and sure enough, there's 24 Scarpettas. So you churn them out.
I try to do one a year. Occasionally, I might do something else instead, like, you know, when the Jack the Ripper, which the new one of that's coming out. So things like that. But it's the books themselves. What they take out of me is it's exhausting. It takes all of my focus, and it hangs over my head the whole time I'm doing it. It's really hard. It's the research that has taken the most out of me, because when I first went to the morgue and started doing all this, you really don't know what it's going to do to you till it's already happened, and then it's too late, and there's no getting out of it, and there's no going back. And I changed my life in a way that I may well have given myself a disease. I won't get over this.
What do you mean a disease?
Because I have like post-traumatic stress type stuff. You know, I have images and things that are like malware. I can't get them out of my head. I've seen things that I don't show my readers. I've heard things that I don't ever tell my readers. And when those things visit me, when I least expect, like when I'm lying in bed just trying to relax a little bit, and then I just get up and I have to just leave the room, because they're too hard. And if I didn't write about it, that's at least something I can do with this really morbid, rather horrible database I have in my head. To be honest with you, it's been hard.
No, I haven't heard you talk quite like that before, and it actually brings me back to where we started with stuff that is in you that goes all the way back to childhood.
Yeah.
Including, and I have to ask you about this because I just wonder if it's still there in you, really close to the surface. You know, you were abused as a child.
I think that the two things that I remember most that I won't get over, and I probably worry about it all the time. I mean, the feeling of being existential, of having no power, that nobody cares, you're invisible, you're a nothing, you're not going to amount to anything, and there's a part of me that I'll always feel like somehow it's going to turn out that way again. I will live running with that chasing me, that I will be that helpless child. You know, once again, and that's what keeps me going, and you don't get over these things. And I think that sometimes when I've so immersed myself in the traumas and the tragedies of other people because I so desperately need to try to heal other people, because I know what it feels like to have nobody come and do that for you. And then when somebody finally does, and I was given that gift with people like Ruth Graham, who made me feel like, wow, if that lady paid attention to me when I'm just this nobody in this little town, maybe there's something special.
It's really about healing yourself, isn't it?
It's about healing myself, and one of the ways we heal ourselves is to heal others. In fact, I don't know of any other way to heal yourself than to do that for other people.
What I hear in your voice is actually an insecurity in a way that is really surprising for a woman who is one of the best-selling authors in the world, you know, who travels with an entourage, who has what all of us from the outside would regard as a fantastic life and so much that's good, and yet you still feel insecure.
Oh, I'll never change. I'm still that scared little girl. I'm still that scared little girl afraid to open the closet door or look under the bed, and so then, by God, I'm going to, because I can't stand being afraid of anything. And that's what people don't understand. They think I'm some superhero like Lucy in these books. I'm not. I learn all these things to do them, but I'm really, at heart, this little girl with a crayon writing poetry and making her own little books and sewing them together and drawing pictures, and yet I've thrown myself into a house of horrors to write something that I felt would matter and would change things and would empower people and take a character to do what I wish I could do. I wish I could kick butt the way she does.
Well, I'm glad you talk about Lucy, because I did want to talk about her, but one particular aspect of her in particular, which is you introduce this character. She's the niece of Scarpetta, and she's a crucial character, and she's gay.
Yeah.
And you are gay, and I don't know whether you actually wanted to come out, but you did come out, and it was quite a complicated story because you had a love affair and it got into the media and it was all quite messy. Oh,
I tended to make mistakes in really big ways. Let's just put it that way.
But you have talked about Ruth Graham, who was a great mentor to you, and she obviously was the wife of Billy Graham, the pastor, the evangelist, an internationally known figure who was a Christian conservative. And in some ways, you've been quite conservative in your life, and yet you have made a point now of speaking out on gay marriage and other issues concerning the gay community. Have you left behind your conservatism?
I was never conservative. I mean, as a kid, I was conservative only because I grew up. I mean, you know, first 7 years in Miami, then North Carolina, a place I wouldn't go right now, hello, by the way. But anyway, in this little town where Billy Graham lives up on the top of the mountain, everything was evangelical Christian stuff. Nobody had liquor in the town that they admitted to. Nobody was gay that they admitted to.
So when you first realized you were gay,
that was really bad.
Were you battling with yourself?
Oh, well, listen, I never even heard of that when I was growing up. There were spinsters and roommates. I never heard of gay people. That you were drunk or a sinner or you were a pedophile or something, a child molester, but the gay stuff was not something that was common in the fabric of my little sheltered world. And never would I have thought that that would be what I would grow up to be. I mean, I didn't make the choice. Why would I want to do that? I mean, and get criticized and picked on. And you know something people don't know? And I'll tell you, and I've never said this in public before. The truth of the matter is, when I got outed, which was when Vanity Fair did this really horrible story, and there was things everywhere because some people just decided to do that because it was just really to be cruel. When I knew all this was coming out, and this was like in the mid-90s, and I was devastated and frightened, and I'd never had my privacy exposed like this, and I knew what this was going to mean to people. I picked up the phone, and I called Ruth Graham, and I said, Ruth, can I come see you? Because there's something I have to tell you, and I'm going to do it in person. So she said, well, sure, honey, come on up. So, you know, got on a plane or my helicopter, I don't remember what it was, but I flew to the mountains in North Carolina. I went up to her house and I sat down and I said, you need to know that I'm gay, and the reason I'm telling you is you're going to hear about it anyway. So here's what she did. She said, oh, honey, I've known you since you're that big. I know that's not true about you. And the fact of the matter is, she was always kind and loving when Stacy met her before Ruth died, and she was always welcoming. But
Stacy's your partner.
Yes, but Ruth, she did not judge me. She never brought it up. But even when Vanity Fair asked her about it, she said the same thing. I've known her since she's that big. She
just wouldn't go into it. She wouldn't accept it in a way.
No.
Just denial.
She couldn't accept it.
Did that hurt you?
It hurt me terribly. It still hurts me. Because as much as I sing her praises and love her, and I know that she was kind and she would never have kicked us out of the house or done anything like that, I don't think she would have voted in our favor based on that she just couldn't deal with it. It was too much against everything that she'd ever been taught and what she was surrounded by and what she lived with, and I didn't compute to her.
Of course, that story's quite a few years old now. I guess we're talking the 1990s. And
yeah, but the last time I saw her was 2006, and I was up on the mountain, and Stacy was, we were all in the bedroom talking, and she couldn't have been kinder, but it's not something we could ever discuss.
You've vanquished a lot of demons, but I'm getting the impression there are still some inside you.
Oh, how can you not have demons in this life? There's so much to deal with, there's so much to overcome, and then just when you overcome some things, you start getting older and have to deal with everything else. So life is a struggle, and it's what we make of it, and as much as I'm so grateful to have the success that I have, I also want to feel I make the world a better place, and that I leave it a better place, and that I'm honest while I'm here, even if it's hard, which is one of the reasons I wanted to do your show, because I like somebody that asks me the hard questions. We should all be giving hard answers to.
And this question of fear that's sort of run through the interview from the very get-go and from the beginning of your life, are you still fearful today?
Of course. I'm fearful of failure. I'm fearful of death, and loss and violence, and I know way too much about everything bad that can happen to everybody. I know the liabilities of all things because I've seen so much, but the thing is, I get to produce something beautiful out of it. The art is fun, and if I entertain people, then I've taken something and actually created something really good out of something that maybe didn't start out so hot.
Patricia Cornwell, it's a great place to end. Thanks for being on Htalk.
Thank you very much. It's great to talk to you.
Thank you. Wow.